Will the Attorney General obey the law or try to bend it? That's the explosive question Senator Chris Van Hollen just forced Pam Bondi to confront, and her answers revealed far more than she probably intended.
So, Attorney General Bondi, I have some budget-related questions to follow up on here. First, with respect to the proposal with the ATF. I heard your testimony here. I heard it in the House, so I really don't want to get into a I'm not questioning you about the policy at this point in time. I think you hear there's bipartisan disagreement here. But I do want to understand your view with respect to the appropriations law, because current appropriations law does require congressional authorization to make this change, to make this merger. And so my question to you, as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, is will you comply with the budget authorization law?
We will comply with the budget law. And you know, Senator, I'm glad you brought this merger up, because if I was still a state prosecutor and hearing this, I would be concerned too about what's happening to ATF. ATF will keep its brand. DEA will keep its brand. But what they're doing, they're going under one umbrella, doing away with the bureaucracy at the top. These agents are going, they want to be out hunting down criminals. That's what they want to do. They work, so much of this work is the same work, going back and forth, and now they will be working collaboratively together to keep America safe. And we're going to put hundreds of agents back, thousands back on the streets, and that's where they want to be. And I would have had the initial concerns that you have about that, but give us a chance, let it work, let the DEA and ATF work together, get those agents out there, do away with the bureaucracy, and hopefully we will make America safer as a result of it.
Well, I will say that wasn't just my reaction to the proposal. I was actually hearing from ATF agents as well. So again, we will obviously review that question in a bipartisan way on the committee, but I just wanted your assurance, and I appreciate it, that you'll comply with the appropriations law, which would require congressional action in order to go forward with
we don't need congressional action for this move, however.
Well, I thought I just got clarification. It's going to be important to both the chairman and myself to understand your position as Attorney General on whether or not you can proceed with this merger without congressional action.
We are keeping ATF, we are keeping DEA. We are putting them under the same umbrella within the Department of Justice.
So I'm not arguing with you here. I want to understand your position. I think it will be important to members on both sides of the committee. The appropriations law currently would require that Congress approve of this merger. And so my question to you as Attorney General is, do you agree with that or disagree with that?
We will complete this reorganization, and I'm committed. I will look at that under the law. We will not violate the law, Senator, and we will work with Congress regarding that.
No, I appreciate that. So the second point I wanted to raise had to do with the prosecution of hate crimes, and I share your vigor in wanting to go after and prosecute hate crimes. I would just point out that the budget that you submitted zeroes out funding for 3 of the DOJ hate crimes programs, the hate crimes training program, Shepard Bird hate crimes, the Javara Hire No Hate Act, and the community approaches to advancing justice. So I hope you'll work with the committee if we seek to restore funding for those programs.
Yes, Senator, I just pulled up the details of those 3. Let me see. I'd be happy to discuss those with you further.
Good. And finally, I want to go back.
All 3 of those.
Thank you. I want to go back to the issues of grant determinations, because I think there continues to be some confusion between grants that had already been obligated that were withheld. And to my knowledge, there are about 400 of those still pending. It'd be helpful to get from your team if you have a different number. And then there's what we call notices for information, which relates to notices for future grant awards in this current fiscal year.
Yes, there is a difference.
And so I understood your earlier testimony to say, with respect to the notices, you the department plan to issue those very shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, and Senator, yes, you are correct on that. We notified the affected grantees and members of Congress regarding the terminations and how to appeal. That was the $811 million of grants that were initially terminated in 2025. We're also talking about upcoming ones as well.
Right. So I want to leave this hearing with some clarity on this issue. So when it comes to the notices of funding opportunities, because the clock is ticking on this fiscal year, do you and the Department of Justice intend to quickly notify people of those opportunities going forward?
Yes, Senator Van Hollen, as I said earlier, and it will be done on a rolling basis, but yes, within the coming weeks, we are absolutely doing that, yes.
And so finally, on
a rolling basis.
On the other category, which are the grants that had been previously obligated, I do have concerns, Madam Attorney General, with the idea that the way we're going to get them to stop being withheld is members of Congress calling. I appreciate the invitation, and I will look to see if we've been hearing from people. But this category of grants relates to people who already went through the process and already had those grants obligated, and they're currently being held. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, can you tell us how many are still being held today? And I don't like the idea that in order for somebody to get their withheld grant unheld, that they have to call a member of Congress. That should be, so how many are left? Do you know how many of these grants are?
I don't know exactly, Senator, but I know many of them are the subject of ongoing litigation, so I wouldn't be able to speak of that in detail in this forum anyway.
Well, maybe just a follow-up, because it would be helpful to try to narrow the scope of this. Again, my understanding, and this was the subject of the letter I referenced earlier from a number of senators.
And I have not read that letter, but I will be happy to read that letter.
If you and your team could get back to us right away on that, because these are grants that, as the chairman knows, have been previously obligated, some many years ago, but frozen. And so the question is, how can we get them unfrozen? And members of Congress will call, but not everybody, can just call up their member of Congress or thinks of calling their member of Congress. We need a process that's fair to everybody. I hope you'd agree.
And actually, citizens have called as well.
Well, exactly. And so, exactly. So, but again, this is an ongoing issue. And I know colleagues on both sides of the aisle are hearing from it, folks. So, Mr. Chairman, unless something else comes up, that's it. And look forward to continuing the conversation.
It's not my intention to ask any topics or questions that cause you to come back again, but if I do.
Thank you, Senator Moran.
You're welcome, General.
Chris Van Hollen put Attorney General Pam Bondi in a position no public official likes to be in, having to answer a simple but high-stakes question: will you comply with the law? That moment may have sounded technical, even procedural, but in reality, it went straight to the foundation of how American government is supposed to work. Because at the center of this exchange wasn't just budget language or bureaucratic reorganizations. It was about whether the executive branch believes it has to follow the rules Congress sets, or whether it can carve its own path without authorization. When Van Hollen pressed Bondi on the budget authorization law, what he was really probing was the balance of power. Congress writes the laws and controls the money. The power of the purse is arguably its strongest authority. If a Justice Department led by the Attorney General believes it can merge agencies, reallocate resources, or move forward with sweeping structural changes without congressional approval, that raises a profound constitutional question. Are we drifting into a system where executive officials can act first and only seek approval later, if at all? Bondi's answers reflected that tension. On the one hand, she assured Van Hollen that the Department of Justice would not violate the law. Yet, almost in the same breath, she argued that DOJ could in fact carry out the ATF-DEA merger without direct congressional action. That's not just a disagreement over paperwork, it's an argument over authority, oversight, and legitimacy. If Congress sets clear limits, and an agency interprets those limits in a way that expands its own freedom of action, the system of checks and balances is being tested in real time. Van Hollen didn't stop at the merger issue. He broadened the lens, pointing out that even frontline ATF agents themselves expressed concern about this plan. That detail is critical. Oversight isn't just about politicians arguing, it's about whether the people doing the work, the agents, prosecutors, grantees, and citizens, believe the system is functioning fairly and legally. His questions tied the debate back to real-world consequences: funding for hate crime prosecutions, the freezing of previously awarded grants, and whether ordinary Americans should have to beg their member of Congress to unlock resources that were already promised to them. This is what made the exchange so powerful. It wasn't grandstanding. It was about accountability in its purest sense. Van Hollen's persistence highlighted how laws are supposed to work, not as suggestions or guidelines, but as binding obligations that even the most powerful officials must respect. By insisting on clarity, he reminded both Bondi and the public that government cannot run on selective compliance. For viewers, the takeaway is bigger than this one hearing. Every time Congress confronts an administration over compliance with budget law or agency authority, the stakes ripple outward. If Congress lets things slide, it sets a precedent. If Congress holds firm, it reinforces the principle that no agency, no matter how important, operates above the law. That's why hearings like this matter. They are live tests of whether democracy's guardrails are still holding. In the end, what Van Hollen did here wasn't flashy, but it was vital. He cut through legalese to demand a straight answer. Will you follow the law or won't you? And that's a question every citizen should care about, because once government officials start bending those rules, it becomes easier for them to bend them again and again. Democracy doesn't erode overnight. It erodes when oversight gets weak and when maybe answers replace clear commitments. So as you watch this back and forth, don't just see it as political sparring. See it as a reminder of why public hearings exist, to force transparency, to demand accountability, and to make sure power remains tethered to law. And if you believe these kinds of breakdowns help cut through the noise and make sense of what's really happening in Washington, then subscribe to this channel and join the conversation, because an informed public is the strongest safeguard against power being misused.